Now, this is one of my favorite lectures, letting go. They're all my favorite, but this is definitely one of my favorite. And I love that so many students responded to this one as being a priority. And I'm really interested in what students want to let go of, like what's on your mind? What are you really needing to let go of? But we talked last time about how, in a lecture before, we talked about how the monkey trap is that they have a gourd and they tie it to a tree, and inside the gourd they carve it out and they put a banana in it, and when the monkey puts its hand in and grips the banana, it can't get its hand out of the gourd, and it just sits there and holds on and clings to the banana, and it's actually a workable trap. Well, that's very similar for us, right? To It's the grasping. This is why in Buddhism one of the things is to let go of clinging, not reaching toward, but clinging, right? Holding on too tight. And so we're gonna explore this idea of releasing and let it go, which students wrote about as, I'd say about 3/4 wrote about this as the mindfulness attitude that you were most intrigued by. So in your personal notes, I want to encourage you to just go ahead and free form, free write a few thoughts about what are a couple of things that you want to let go of. For me, it was pressure. The thing that came up a lot was pressure. I want to let go of feeling like when I have a bunch of things to do, I can have a bunch of things to do without feeling a ton of pressure. But I have a big habitual response pattern of feeling pressure, which is really natural. But it's also a capacity that I have to let go of that pressure. So, what are a few of the things that you would like to practice letting go of? And we're going to be exploring some different kinds of practices of letting go that you can mix and match or try. And the mindfulness exercise for the week is to try to practice one or more of these throughout the week. So we can look at letting go as releasing of grasping or clinging, opening our hand, allowing things to be as they are, and not being too caught up in pushing things to be a certain way when they are already not that way in this particular moment. We can always work to change, but it's very much relating to allowing. Now, letting go can be challenging because we're also designed to hold on, to strive, be persistent, and to grasp. So we are wired to reach out and go for things, right? We're motivated. We need to get up and go for food. That's part of the monkey's dilemma. The monkey's dilemma illustrates where the wiring, how we're designed to go reach out and get things, can be a trap, that we don't have to cling, and that the clinging part is the trap part. So the Tao, which we've talked about, which is the whole and the juxtapositions of opposites within the whole, shows us that life is both. And I know you've heard of the yin yang. We're going to look at some of the symbolic associations with the yin yang. The yang is the masculine energy and the yin is the feminine energy. And this doesn't mean man or woman, because as you can see from the symbol, we each have both in it. So gender fluidity, and this yin yang symbol is always moving like the ocean waves. So sometimes it's mostly dark and then mostly light. So sometimes it's in the middle. So it undulates around just like your own life does. So we have this opposite juxtaposition of opposite experiences within one whole. So the yang is the reaching symbolically, and the yin is the receiving. So receiving the breath and releasing the breath, right? So we have two within one. 1 + 1 = 1. I have an old friend who used to say that, a wandering minstrel. Okay, so these are some of the symbolic associations with the yang. It's associated with the light, reaching for the sun, right? Flying towards the sun, reaching for things, reaching for goals, achieving, going for it. It's an active principle, lots of energy. We all use a lot of yang. We're all a combination of yin and yang. It doesn't matter that we identify as male, female, or whatever. We're a combination of both of these, and they flow within us. But these are the symbolic associations. It has a more focused view, right? So you're You have to focus on something to reach for it. And figuring things out, order and structure, it's related to order and organizing things and having structure, like the structure of our roads, the structure of power, the power system, so that we have the lights that turn on, the structure. We have lots of structures in society that are these are yang energies, the structure. And then the yin is the receptive, the open, the allowing, the welcoming in, right? And it's associated with the moon and darkness and mystery. It's an open, big picture view, seeing more of the whole. It's associated with chaos and creativity. So adding the infusion of the new into the structure, if you don't add the new into structures, they become rigid and tyrannical. So too much order and things become rigid and too controlling. I don't know why I didn't use that word more in this talk. And then, so we need the yin, of course, to bring its new insights. When we're dreaming, we're in the yin state. So that's why it's associated with chaos. Chaos is associated with creativity, because when you mix things up in a jumbled way, you have the opportunity to put new things together that didn't occur to you before. And then the feminine energies. So it's very interesting to notice that we have two within one in our brain. We have a right and left hemisphere of the brain. This is the front of the brain. There's the spinal cord. So right and left hemisphere of the brain. And why two brain hemispheres? Why would we have two separate brain hemispheres? They're linked here in the middle by a thing called the corpus callosum. It's a bridge. Like I was referring to the heart as the bridge between our higher chakras and our earth chakras. I don't like to call them lower chakras. They're just saying lower in terms of where they are, in terms of location, not in terms of less than. So we can ask ourselves, why two hemispheres? Why? It could just be one, but why split in two with a pathway? And the corpus callosum, that bridge, inhibits traffic between one and the other as much as it enables dialogue. So it's very inhibitory, this bridge in the middle. And it's not true that one is logical and one is creative. That is completely false. We need both hemispheres to be logical. We need both hemispheres to be creative. But the two hemispheres do have vastly different ways of seeing the world. And the way that we know this is because if somebody has a stroke on their right hemisphere, this is the front of the brain, on their right hemisphere, then they react and behave different. And so what's operating is their left hemisphere. They behave differently than people who have a stroke in the left hemisphere. So let's look at, there's a number of people, but this is the consummate scholar who is such an intense scholar that he's extremely difficult to dispute. His name is Ian McGilchrist. His work is being talked about a great deal right now, and it's called, his previous book, he's coming out with a new one, The Master and His Emissary. So we're going to look at that. We're going to watch this RSA animate. This is Royal Society for the Arts animation on the divided brain. It's short, it moves fast. Just relax, take a breath, and enjoy it, okay? Because it's very good, but we will review what it says, so don't worry if you don't catch all of it. All right.
The division of the brain is something neuroscientists don't like to talk about anymore. It enjoyed a sort of popularity in the 60s and 70s after the first split brain operations, and it led to a sort of popularization which has since been proved to be entirely false. It's not true that one part of the brain does reason and the other does emotion. Both are profoundly involved in both. It's not true that language resides only in the left hemisphere. It doesn't. Important aspects are in the right. It's not true that visual imagery is only in the right hemisphere. Lots of it is in the left. And so in a sort of fit of despair, people have given up talking about it. But the problem won't really go away, because this organ, which is all about making connection, is profoundly divided. It's there inside all of us, and it's got more divided over the course of human evolution, so that the ratio of the corpus callosum to the volume of the hemispheres has got smaller. over evolution. And the plot thickens when you realize that one of the main, if not the main, function of the corpus callosum is in fact to inhibit the other hemisphere. So something very important is going on here about keeping things apart from one another. And not only that, the brain is profoundly asymmetric. It's broader at the back on the left and broader on the right at the front, and slightly juts forward and backward. And it's as though somebody got hold of the brain from underneath and given it a sort of sharp twist clockwise. What is all that about? If one just needed more brain space, one would do it symmetrically. The skull is symmetrical. The box in which all this is contained is symmetrical. Why go to trouble to expand some bits of one hemisphere and some bits of another, unless they were doing rather different things? What are they doing? Well, it's not just we who have these divided brains. Birds and animals have them as well. I think the simplest way to think of it is if you imagine a bird trying to feed on a seed against the background of grit or pebbles. It's got to focus very narrowly and clearly on that little seed and be able to pick it out against that background. But it's also, if it's going to stay alive, it's got to actually keep a quite different kind of attention open. It's got to be on the lookout for predators or for friends, for conspecifics, but for whatever else is going on. It seems that birds and animals quite reliably use their left hemisphere for this narrow focused attention to something it already knows is of importance to it. And they keep their right hemisphere vigilant broadly for whatever might be without any commitment as to what that might be. And they also use their right hemispheres for making connections with the world. So they approach their mates and bond with their mates more using the right hemisphere. But then you come to the humans. And it's true that actually in humans too, this kind of attention is one of the big differences. The right hemisphere gives sustained, broad, open vigilance, alertness, where the left hemisphere gives narrow, sharply focused attention to detail. And people who lose their right hemispheres have a pathological narrowing of the window of attention. But humans are different. The big thing about humans is their frontal lobes. And the purpose of that part of the brain? To inhibit the rest of the brain, to stop the immediate happening. So standing back in time and space from the immediacy of experience. And that enables us to do two things. It enables us to do what neuroscientists are always telling us we're very good at, which is outwitting the other party, being Machiavellian. And that's interesting to me, because that's absolutely right. We can read other people's minds and intentions, and if we so want to, we can deceive them. But the bit that's always curiously missed out here is that it also enables us to empathize for the first time, because there's a sort of necessary distance from the world. If you're right up against it, you just bite. But if you can stand back and see that other individual is an individual like me, who might have interests and values and feelings like mine, then you can make a bond. There's a sort of necessary distance, as there is in reading. Too close, you can't see anything. Too far, you can't read it. So the distance from the world that is provided is profoundly creative of all that is human, both the Machiavellian and the Erasmian. Now, to do the Machiavellian stuff, to manipulate the world, which is very important, we need to be able to interact with the world and use it for our benefit. Food is the starting point, but we also, with our left hemispheres, grasp using our right hands things and make tools. We also use that part of language to grasp things, as we say. It pins them down. So when we already know something's important and we want to be precise about it, we use our left hemispheres in that way. And to do that, we need a simplified version of reality. It's no good if you're fighting a campaign, having all the information on all the plant species that grow in the terrain of battle. What you need is to know the specifics of where certain things are that matter to you. And so you have a map and you have little flags. It's not reality, but it works better. The newness of the right hemisphere makes it a devil's advocate. It's always on the lookout for things that might be different from our expectations. It sees things in context. It understands implicit meaning, metaphor, body language, emotional expression in the face. It deals with an embodied world in which we stand embodied in relation to a world that is concrete. It understands individuals, not just categories. It actually has a disposition for the living rather than the mechanical. And this is so marked that even in a left-hander who is actually using their right hemisphere in daily life to manipulate tools with their left hand, it is their left hemisphere, not their right hemisphere, in which tools and machines are coded. So this is very interesting. And it changes the view of the body. The body becomes an assemblage of parts in the left hemisphere. If I had to sum it all up, I would get away from all those things that we used to say, reason and imagination. Let me make it very clear. For imagination, you need both hemispheres. Let me make it very clear. For reason, you need both hemispheres. So if I had to sum it up, I'd say the world of the left hemisphere, dependent on denotative language and abstraction, yields clarity and power to manipulate things that are known, fixed, static, isolated, decontextualized, explicit, general in nature, but ultimately lifeless. The right hemisphere, by contrast, yields a world of individual, changing, evolving, interconnected, implicit, incarnate, living beings within the context of the lived world, but in the nature of things never fully graspable, never perfectly known. And to this world, it exists in a certain relationship. The knowledge that's mediated by the left hemisphere is, however, within a closed system. It has the advantage of perfection, but the perfection is bought ultimately at the price of emptiness. There's a problem here about the nature of the two worlds. They offer us two versions of the world, and obviously we combine them in different ways all the time. We need to rely on certain things to manipulate the world, but for a broad understanding of it, we need to use knowledge that comes from the right hemisphere. And it's my suggestion to you that in the history of Western culture, things started in the 6th century BC, in the Augustan era, and in the 15th, 16th century in Europe, with a wonderful balancing of these hemispheres. But in each case, it drifted further to the left hemisphere's point of view. Nowadays, we live in a world which is paradoxical. We pursue happiness, and it leads to resentment, and it leads to unhappiness, and it leads, in fact, to an explosion of mental illness. We've pursued freedom, but we now live in a world which is more monitored by CCTV cameras, and in which our daily lives are more subjected to what de Tocqueville called a network of small, complicated rules that cover the surface of life and strangle freedom. More information, we have it in spades, but we get less and less able to use it, to understand it, to be wise. There's a paradoxical relationship, as I know as a psychiatrist, between adversity and fulfillment, between restraint and freedom, between the knowledge of the part and wisdom about the whole. It's a machine model, again, that is supposed to answer everything, but it doesn't. Think about this. Even rationality is grounded in a leap of intuition. There is no way you can rationally prove that rationality is a good way to look at the world. We intuit that it is very helpful. And this is not new. At the other end of the process, rationality, we know from Gödel's theorem, we know from what Pascal was saying hundreds of years before Gödel, that the end point of rationality is to demonstrate the limits to rationality. In our modern world, we've developed something that looks awfully like the left hemisphere's world. We prioritize the virtual over the real. The technical becomes important. Bureaucracy flourishes. The picture, however, is fragmented. There's a loss of uniqueness. The how has become subsumed in what. And the need for control leads to a paranoia in society that we need to govern and control everything. Why this shift? I think there are three reasons. One is the left hemisphere's talk is very convincing because it shaved everything that it doesn't find fits with its model off and cut it out. So this particular model is entirely self-consistent, largely because it's made itself so. I also call the left hemisphere the Berlusconi of the brain, because it controls the media. It's the one with which it's very vocal on its own behalf. The right hemisphere doesn't have a voice, and it can't construct these same arguments. And I also think, rather more importantly, there's a sort of hall of mirrors effect. The more we get trapped into this, the more we undercut and ironize things that might have led us out of it. And we just get reflected back into more of what we know about what we know about what we know. And I just want to make it clear, I'm not against whatever it is the left hemisphere has to offer. Nobody could be more passionate in an age in which we neglect reason and we neglect careful use of language. Nobody could be more passionate than myself about language and about reason. It's just that I'm even more passionate about the right hemisphere and the need to return what that knows to a broader context. It turned out that Einstein's thinking somehow presaged this thing about the structure of the brain. He said, the intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant, but has forgotten the gift.
Bang. Okay, so that's a lot, I know, in a short period of time. So let's run over some of the things that he was talking about there. First of all, the hemispheres, different views of the world. The left, focused attention. The right, big picture view. So zoom in, zoom out. And the left can figure things out, like the parts of a computer. Or next week, actually, we're going to watch a film instead of have a live lecture like this, because my husband is having a surgery, and the surgeons are going to fix something with him, and they can do it because they've figured out the specificity. But they've gone in and figured out the details, the micro details. So there's great value. We need the left hemisphere. It grasps, it controls, it manipulates things, it pins them down, it analyzes them. Think a bird focusing on the seed. But we also need the right hemisphere. And as McGilchrist was saying, we've overemphasized the left to the expense of the right. And the right hemisphere is when we zoom out, when we see the connections, the interrelatedness of things. If I use the example of having surgery, it's the surgeon's ability to do the surgery, but also zoom out and see the patient as a person, not as just a body part that is going to be fixed, for example, right? So it's seeing the connections, the relationships, and there's an intuitive part of our mind. And we'll talk about intuition later, because it's an art to be tuning into your intuition. But we need them both. And McGilchrist is arguing that we have overemphasized the left in our culture. So we'll look at that a little bit in Western society, modern society, really, because of our desire to control our environment. One of the ways that we can see that that emphasis is in our frenzy to control the environment and make it comfortable for us. And pleasurable for us. We're not looking at the right hemisphere's perspective of the impact of the environment. We're not seeing that. We're not seeing from that perspective. Whereas if you think about the native cultures and indigenous cultures, they're tuned in to the impact of what they're doing on future generations and the earth. So you can see that skewed perception, and we can correct this for ourselves. Now, this is just a slide that illustrates that the right and left hemisphere, each of their perceptual views and their gifts, what they bring to the table, the abilities that they give us, are also related to the yang and the yin, the ancient symbolism of the yang and the yin in really interesting ways. So there's a correlation between these two, right? Now, we experience the left brain when we focus on specifics, when we grasp things, when you study, when you sort through detail. You experience the right brain when you sit back and your mind puts all the connections together between the different things. And so you get insights about things and awarenesses about things when the pieces of the puzzle come together. The right brain sees the gestalt, the whole. It understands, you can think about something like somebody does something wrong. The left brain will say, well, you broke the law. The right brain is able to see why that happened, how that could come to be, the context and the nuance. And you can see how we can get trapped in one or the other, right? Well, we're less likely to get trapped into the right brain. And one of the reasons is because language, the left brain, language is sort of the words are the method of communication of the left brain, whereas because they pin things down, we try to find the right word, whereas images, pictures, and experience, the embodied experiences that we have are more the language of the right brain, sensing, feeling, picking things up. Okay, so the left brain, look how about it sees the uniqueness of the individual, and the right brain sees how the individual is connected with the whole. the interconnectedness of things, right? So we can think about it as zooming in and zooming out. So is modern society too left brain, which is what McGilchrist is proposing. And we're not going into a long thing on this, but it's a very interesting thesis, and it's being dialogued a lot about right now. So this would set us focus more on controlling than on allowing. And we can ask ourselves, are we doing this, right? So if we're in a cultural matrix that leans this way, then we will pick that up, even unconsciously. Our brain, our autopilot brain will pick that up and emphasize that as we move through our day. So it can set us up to want to control rather than open up and allow too much, right? Because again, we need the harmonic value, more on valuing doing over being. And I see this all the time when people tell me they have a hard time letting themselves relax, when allowing yourself to relax, interestingly, is a core part of peak performance, because high performing people toggle between, say, an hour and a half or so of high intensity focus, and then they step back and do a zoom out kind of thing. And you're in a more of a zoom out right brain state when you can see things in your peripheral vision, versus right now you're focusing in and honing in on this video, which is why walking out in nature, and a lot of time people like going for drives for the same kind of reason. Focusing on specifics over the big picture. So the example of going to the doctor and being felt like you're being seen as an assemblage of parts rather than all, which is valuable and important so that we can hone in and figure out what's going on, having stomach troubles, having what trouble, compared to being an entire being, right? So we can break the flower down and understand the parts and pieces of the flower, but that doesn't give us an experience of the flower. So the right brain is the experiencing of the flower, remember that embodied experience, and emphasizing the what and how over the why. It's the white brain that gives us the meaning. This is why to make all those clothes, right? So we obviously, you can see that we need both. So an example of overemphasizing is materialism and overconsumption. So making things without concern for the why or the big picture impact, and controlling the environment versus being in relationship with it. So he called the book The Master and His Emissary, because as a metaphor for the right brain being the big picture perspective, and you hear this in Einstein's quote, the master, big picture, because it can see the bigger view and the interconnectedness of all things. Whereas the emissary goes out and deals with the details, counts the number of grains and things like that. So it's meant to be that the emissary serves the right brain, not the reverse from his point of view. And these are just a couple of quotes that illustrate that idea. Here's the right brain knowledge versus left brain knowledge versus right brain wisdom, right? Understanding, seeing the interconnectedness. Einstein also said, as you saw there, that we've forgotten the gift, right, of intuition. Now, the great Swiss psychologist Carl Jung, who we'll look at more as we go down the road, said it's the job of the ego to live in service to the soul, not the other way around. So an example of this personally would be if you have something within yourself that you feel called to do, and you use your egoic mind, which is more left brain oriented, can figure out how to do things to help make that happen, to figure out how to make that happen. So Jung has the ego soul model, and his model soul does not represent it's not a spiritual or religious view of the soul. It's more, it's what he's speaking of there is the right brain view of the world, the right brain experience of the world, again, embodied within us, more mysterious, the way your intuition and imagination is more mysterious than the logical, practical, rational left ego orientation, and that we, both of these are part of us, right? So again, he's saying it's the job of the ego to live in service of the soul, not the job of the soul to live in service of the ego. So I think you get the sense there. So the Tao relates to establishing harmony and living in harmony, which means allowing. And I talked about this part, and we'll look at left brain, right brain more later, but I talk about this part here. I want to bring this up here so that you can see that letting go and releasing, allowing, which is right brain, allowing, is right brain orientation to allow your child to be the way they are and not try to control them too much. And as someone who's been a child, you can understand that juxtaposition, that line of encouraging and helping to shaping your child so that they're a positive social influence and don't go around biting people like a 3-year-old, but also the essence of their spirit emerges and is able to be express itself in the world, right? So that's allowing the child to be, right? So it's a flow between these two dynamics. So letting go, if you ask yourself, is my life more oriented? Do I spend more of my time and energy and mind space oriented around controlling, and in the way I work with emotions, controlling or allowing? You will probably notice that there's more in the realm of trying to control. And so we can help to rationally reflect on how we can create more harmony. And we intuitively sense this within ourselves by allowing there to be more flow, more releasing, more letting go of trying to grasp the banana. So now we're going to look at different kinds of practices and ways that we can let go. We can practice letting go. And these are different kinds of exercises, right? So the first part is embracing letting go as a natural part of life. Every time you breathe out, you let go. And we can see this as not something that is sort of effortful that we have to do, but rather part of being in the flow of life is to be releasing and letting go. And there's a process, the 3-step process of let be, let go, and open. So, and they're all important, each of these steps for the letting go process. And they can be done very fast, or they can be done more methodically and slow. So letting be is noticing what is in this moment right now. Let's all just take a breath. And just notice how you're feeling right now. Calm, energized, interested, bored, antsy. Just notice. And we're just noticing and letting that be. That's what it is, rather than resisting it. I don't want to feel this way, is the resistance. So letting be is just noticing. Like this, you can think of your emotions and your experiences, the inner states you experience as like children. A child has entered the room, right? That's feeling X, Y, or Z way. And we can just observe that child and let that child be. We can let it be. And then the second step is to let go, which is to allow it to flow, allow the emotional state or the experience to flow rather than clinging onto it, which is holding onto it, grabbing it. So we allow it to move through us, and we can imagine that we're porous and the water is flowing through us, or the energy is flowing through us. And then the next is open to the new, shift to a more creative, loving, grateful, or feeling good kind of mode, right? So we want to, in addition to let go, we also want to welcome in. And what we want to welcome in, because nature doesn't like a vacuum, so it's going to try to fill it up. So what you want to do is fill it up with what you want to create more of within yourself. So we'll look at these in a little bit more detail. The first thing to notice is that emotion is energy in motion. And we'll look at this later when we look at emotions specifically. But emotion is related to, is energetic, and it has an energetic feel to it. So we feel certain kinds of energies in our body, like when we're feeling worried compared to when we're feeling angry, compared to when we're feeling excited and happy, right? They have we know we're feeling those things because we feel there's different signals to each of these. And emotions are meant to flow. But what happens is that we grab onto them, we resist them. And by resisting them, we're sort of holding them back from being able to flow on and through us. Scientists actually say that the emotions we feel last only from a few to 90 seconds, but we sustain them with our thinking mind. And this is actually referred to as biting the hook. Oop, don't bit the hook. Don't bite the hook, which is an example of this is then I see myself doing this all the time. And part of letting go is just deciding not to bite that hook. A funny one was I was in the bathroom, like brushing my hair or something. And I said something supportive to my husband. And he said, "What? I can't hear you." And I actually got annoyed that he couldn't hear me. And I could feel that annoyance start to rise up in me because he couldn't hear me. And I was going to have to say it louder or go out and tell him. And this is sort of, the primal nature. So I could feel myself getting annoyed and wanting to say something snappy. And then my mind said, "Oh, great. Now I'm going to have to go out and, stop what I'm doing and go out and tell him." And I had to laugh almost immediately after that because all of this was about trying to say something positive to my husband. So I end up getting pissy about saying something positive. And you can see how silly that is, right? So we can think when we grab onto it with our thoughts, that's like when somebody cuts us off in traffic and we feel that sort of primitive animalistic feeling of, you got in the way of my goal, I'm annoyed with you, surge up. And then our mind meets that and starts to ruminate on it. That ew. And then, what a jerk. And then we go off on a spin. And we all do this. We're all vulnerable to this. So a big part of Don't Biting the Hook, and Pima Chodron wrote the book, Don't Bite the Hook. It's a beautiful book, is about releasing those, right? Letting those go in the moment, right? And shifting. And the time in the bathroom, which just recently happened, I had to laugh at myself. So letting be involves noticing the thought or feeling and realizing it just is, right? So we gain, yoga, one of the reasons why yoga and sports like that help train, help our mind is because when we hold poses that are uncomfortable for periods of time, we are teaching our body that we can do hard things, that we can tolerate this discomfort. And so that's how yoga, through physical embodiment of holding poses, helps the body learn, helps the mind learn that we can be okay and tolerate discomfort for a little while. We don't have to react to, so that's one of the, the underneath trainings of the practice like yoga. So this is very similar, only we're not holding a pose. Instead, we're noticing in the moment that we're feeling a certain way, or we're experiencing, just like I illustrated with you in the bathroom, and naming or labeling the experience. I'm experiencing annoyance right now, rather than I am annoyed. Don't make it become you, because then there is no space, right? And as he said, we can't read when there has to be a little bit of space for us to really be able to work with something. So you don't want to say I am annoyed. You want to shift the I am phrases, like I am depressed, I am annoyed, because first of all, those things are reinforcing the part of your autopilot brain that's always on and listening and recording info. And the more it hears it, the more it grooves it in. So instead, I'm experiencing annoyance, I'm experiencing depression, right? So naming or labeling helps us activate the prefrontal lobes and begin to create that space, that buffer. So I notice I'm feeling annoyed. So that's where the self-awareness, that's the invaluable first step of self-awareness. And then the let be step is to allow rather than resist. And the way that we allow is we relax our body, because we'll tense up and contract. And in the process of contracting, we push it away. So instead we can Relax the muscles, relax, relax, and allow there to be some space, create some space around what you're experiencing so that it can flow, because its nature will be to flow and move on. You'll experience many different emotional states unless you're caught in a mood or going through a crisis. You'll experience, or falling in love. Those are ones that abduct us for a while. You'll experience many ups and downs through the day. And so allowing them to flow, and you kind of know the ones that you contract up against, in which case it gets trapped inside, it doesn't flow. Right? So we all have some accumulated emotions from times when they were trapped inside. And of course, when were we taught about this? Instead of being taught about this beginning by, we could start teaching kids about this stuff at age 2 in age appropriate language and methods and stuff. There's all kinds of mindfulness and learning about emotions and how to let emotions flow and work with them. Now, in the film we're going to watch next week, instead of having this live stream class, which is, the film is posted online free, so you don't have to have Netflix or anything to do it, will give us a visible illustration of kids young people, 8th graders, 14, 15-year-olds, adolescents. You already saw the preview to it, watching them go through their journey of being resistant and then learning how to move through using mindfulness to let go, to relax. So I want to emphasize that the letting be is to allow, and letting go is when we relax. We relax the tension and we hold it with the space of relax. So I notice I'm feeling contracted or annoyed, and I allow my muscles to relax. I just release and relax my muscles. So the Sedona method, there's a Sedona method meditation included, a guided one. It's very good, included in the optional meditations. You get to choose 2 of an assortment to do this week. And the Sedona method meditation is a really good one, asking yourself these questions as part of the letting go process, because there's some things that are hard to let go and some things that are easier to let go. Obviously, it was an easier thing for me to let go of feeling annoyed with my partner in that moment. Not with him, with the situation, with what was, with letting be, with the reality of what was, which was I was in the bathroom and he was over there and he couldn't hear my loving thing I said to him. I still find it so funny that saying a loving thing made me annoyed because I wasn't in the right place. But that's the goal frustration of our animal. My goal wasn't met. Somebody got in the way of me being able to get to the bone. And so that part of you acts up. And so we can soothe that part of us. So the questions that are involved in the Sedona method, as they walk you through the process, or would I be willing to let go of this? Am I willing? Would I be willing? Can I let go of this? And we're listening to ourselves, because sometimes we have things where we've got complicated emotions wrapped up around them, and it takes us some time to unravel them and let go. And if you notice this, can I let go of a part of this, a little piece of it? Because we can let go of things incrementally, right? So can I let go of being annoyed that I have to walk out of the bathroom? Let it go, let it flow. That I have to walk out of the bathroom to say something to my husband, right? Would I be willing to let go of feeling pressure when I have a lot of work to do? Is a bigger question. And we're in dialogue with our interiority, our interior space. So it's like you have a team in there that you're working with, and you have to work with the team at the team's pace also within you. You can't just top down dictate, or we will all be on top of the world. So nature doesn't like a vacuum. So when you let something go, you want to fill the space by shifting or opening up to the good. And this is the wiring, as well as the stretching and growing our familiarity and comfort with feeling good. It's a really interesting phenomenon with depression, that people who have been depressed for a period of time can get to the place where they're not feeling depressed, there's this in-between place where they're not feeling depressed, but they're also not really feeling good, right? So they have to relearn feeling good. They're sort of in this neutral place where they're not feeling bad, but they're not feeling good either. So we actually have to grow our feeling good muscle. We have an X level of feeling good that we're used to. And so we want to stretch that muscle as well. So these are some things you can do. Think of things you're grateful for and glad about. Connect with someone you like in your life or imagination. Let yourself feel cared for. Do something that delights or pleases you. And pleasure releases natural opioids that help move our brain to the green. So this is all part of you doing a sort of feel-good push-up. And a question I like to ask myself is, how can I help myself feel better right now? That's a really helpful question. All of these are practices that you can choose from this week. A great practice to do regularly is don't sweat the small stuff. Now, drama kings and queens are people who make a big deal out of everything, right? So don't sweating the small stuff is making the habit. And there's a wonderful little book and resource, and I'm sure website that you could explore on don't sweat the small stuff. And there, don't sweat the small stuff in love, don't sweat the small stuff in parenting. And it was written by Richard Carlson. And he's got this is a lovely book with like short little reflections on how to let go, or ways to reframe how we think about things so that we don't grasp or cling onto it and turn it into something that we can be annoyed or resentful about. And there are small things and there are big things, right? So no worries is a phrase my brother uses as a surfer. And I love that phrase because he says it all the time. Oh, no worries, no worries, no worries. And so what he's doing is letting go, is the practice of letting go of the little things so they don't get turned into bigger things than they need to be, So this is a wonderful practice. Open hand is a practice of doing this in what's called embodying the practice of letting go, or feeling it in your body. We all learn a little different, and we all experience things more deeply, a little different, some vision, some auditory, some physical, and all of us, a combination of all of them. So they're just a little bit more, or however, whichever ones we like to emphasize. So when I'm standing in the bathroom and I realize that let be is the reality is I'm in here, he's in there. So that's just how it is. And it's also just how it is that I felt this little surge because I couldn't get my bone, which is him hearing my warm, fuzzy thing I was trying to say. In the process of letting go, you can literally open your hand. Just release it, a physical expression of releasing, and then putting your hand on your heart to honor that you're letting go, to give appreciation for the letting go process, which is part of you being part of the world. Remember, this is a natural part of our world. So it would make sense for us to spend half of our time allowing and letting go and not trying to make things happen, allowing people to be, allowing the people in our life to be a little bit more. This doesn't mean that you don't assert yourself. And we'll talk about this in relationships, because you have needs too that you want to take care of within the context of relationships. So this is not about not asserting or not implementing changes that need to be, but it is about letting go of things that we know we don't need to hold on to, that it doesn't make sense to hold on to. This is just a cute little cartoon. We can take a breath. Monkey's got his hand stuck in there, free banana. Some things are easier to let go of than others, and we've got coils of energy wrapped up about some things that we may have been shoving away for a while, and it can take some time. So being patient. And sometimes it helps with some of the bigger things when emotions are too strong. We want to do the letting go process with someone, not trying to carry all of that alone. I mean, there's certainly appropriate times to use the methods we usually use for working with things to let go of, like distraction, to help calm down the emotion and calm down our mental state. So we don't always want to be in there emotionally processing, but we can get help. And one of the main goals of therapists, one of the main things that therapists do is help people release and let the emotions flow on and out. Remember, the idea is that emotions flow. You can imagine yourself as porous like a colander so that the emotions can flow through rather than so solid. And there's a great right to release. I've done this a lot of times, and it's been shown by research to work. It's a wonderful method. And what you do is you take something that your mind is stewing on, that it doesn't seem to be willing to let go of, and you write about it for 20 minutes, free write, 4 to 5 days. And that's it. You stop after 5 days. So you just free write for 20 minutes, and then you put it away. And the next day, 20 minutes, put it away. And you do that, and what you'll find is that the energy just flows out of you through the writing onto the page, and your mind it opens things up, and your mind moves to a new space on it. So I want to emphasize again that if things get too tough, reach out, because a huge part of counseling is the therapist helps hold the emotion. Hold the space for the emotion that are too strong for us. We go through experiences of trauma and grief where we owe it to ourselves to give ourselves the experience of having someone with us to help process that. And there are other things that you can write to release and get yourself into a new space so you have a fresh inner energy to work on that problem, right? It releases some of the baggage related to the problem, so you don't have both the problem and the baggage. Shift from self-blame to self-change. So we all want to break the pattern of self-blame and recrimination. So critical thoughts can open us to compassion when we realize that, wow, it's rough in here, and it's rough for other people inside their own minds too. And we're connected with other people in that way, that we have these rough inner critic minds. It's not just you. It's probably about 2/3 of people to 3/4 have a rough inner critic voice, and the rest of them have learned how to transform that inner critic voice into an inner coach, into a kinder, gentler, supportive voice that helps them flourish. People often get better about their inner critic voice as they get older. So you do not need to live with the inner critic voice. That doesn't mean that we don't acknowledge mistakes and work to transform. We do. This is Maya Angelou. She said, do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. And that's the key. That's the essential innocence. When we know better, we can shift. So we acknowledge what the mistake or the error or being off the mark about something. We make amends where it's important. Repairs, emotional repair. Relationships are built on repair. They're built on connecting through repair, through my bad, I'm sorry. And then I love you, which is the Ho'oponopono prayer. So we'll talk about that later. It's a Polynesian way of connecting. And then decide on the new way you want to be and move on. An important point is that people who thrive in life do not ruminate over their past mistakes. I'm going to repeat that. People who thrive in life do not ruminate over their past mistakes. They don't ignore them. They learn the lesson. They make amends. Sorry about that. My mistake. It's okay. We all make mistakes. It's okay. It's okay to make mistakes because we all make mistakes, just like it's okay to make letting go a normal part of your life, not something special that you do. It's part of letting go many times a day. You can drop something in the sink, and when you do, you can let go. Decide on the way you want to be, the course correction you want to make, and then move forward. Okay. So replace the critical voice, and putting Post-its or signs around so that your autopilot mind picks them up over and over and they get wired into the default mode network rather than the critical stuff is a really wise idea. So having things that inspire you and train your brain to communicate to itself in the way that you want it to, rather than in a highly critical way. You can see as self-blame kinds of phrases here. And when you catch yourself saying these to yourself, which is a natural part of the mind, mean, it has a tendency to do this because of the negativity bias, remember, and because we have sort of a society that is tilted to the left brain. And so we're taking things apart, we're picking things apart rather than appreciating the whole. And we're the generation now that is going to help right that, because the Renaissance was right brain. So we can help be the ones that usher in a new Renaissance. And we shift it to phrases that we say to ourselves for growth and change, right? Understanding that we're a growing, evolving being. Consciousness itself is growing and evolving, right? So these more positive, self-reinforcing statements and guided meditation. There are numerous guided meditation guides that do these phrases, and you can listen to them as you're going to sleep. I do them all the time, that help rewire. Michael Seeley is one of my favorites. I'll share with you more as we go along. But these guided meditations are longer and include a lot of phrases and mantras for, like I am open to giving and receiving love. I am open to doing the best I can in life, that regenerate confidence and rewire sort of thinking patterns that can be negative. So these are some of the meditations that are provided in this week's meditation and mindfulness exercise that you can listen to for. These are different kinds. This one's only 10 minutes, so you can click on them and explore them. I think there's 4 of them there. And our idea of let be, let go, and open and grow. Let's take a breath. Oh, and that's it. Okay, that's it. So to close, let's take a breath. I'm going to run through and ask you guys to do the closing chat share of your favorite thing you learned from this particular lecture, letting go. What do you want to let go of? You took notes. And then release. Letting go is releasing of the grasping or clinging. All right. Holding on too hard. That letting go can be challenged because we're sort of tilted too much to the left, and we're so focused on controlling rather than allowing. So you can think of the yin yang as controlling and allowing. But we do both. We need both, right? So, and we looked at the symbolism of the yang, which is the light, and the yin, which is the mystery of the darkness. And we have the moon in the night and the stars, which reflect the yin, and that these reflect the left and right side of the brain in ways that are absolutely fascinating. We looked at the 2 hemispheres of the brain, and that they actually have different ways of seeing and taking in the world and interpreting the world. So this is Ian McGilchrist. 2 different hemispheres, focused, grasping, pecking at the seeds, versus broad picture view, taking in the peripheral environment around you. It's we definitely need to go into the right brain orientation or experience more in order to relax, because we get tired from the left brain. Okay, this shows the left brain, right brain hemisphere functions, and comparing that with the yang and the yin. We experience left brain when we sort through details, grasp things, focus on things, put our attention in one place. Right brain when we're zooming out, seeing connections, understanding nuance. Humor and comedy is very right brain because you have to understand the nuance. The idea of is modern society too left-brained. Some examples of that. So we understand how Einstein perceived that knowledge and understanding why to use that knowledge, how to use that knowledge is the right brain. The information and is the left brain. So they're both so valuable, but we obviously need to understand why we're using the information. And that's the idea that it's the job of the ego to live in service of the soul. So you could say it's the job of my functioning self, the ego, to live in service of my higher self, is another way of thinking of that. And then we have the ego soul model matches this. We'll talk more about that later. The Tao bringing harmony into our life would definitely entail allowing and letting go to be more part of our life. And then the practices. And one thing you could write in the chat, in addition to your favorite thing that you learned from this lecture that you sort of writing down helps groove that neural pathway and helps you remember it, is which of these practices you want to work on or use this week to let go. Part of it is just realizing that it's natural and to get in the habit of it, to get used to allowing. One of the ways of thinking of it is allowing people to be is a great one. The let be, let go, and flow, and then open process is a great one because it's a 3-step process that you can go through in a short period over a longer period. Realizing that energy, emotion is energy is moving through us, and it's meant to move on and through, and not biting the hook, avoiding biting the hook. That doesn't mean we don't want to think about problems and solve problems. We do. What we're talking about here is not going into rumination, not getting caught up. Caught up is a good way to say it. Letting be, this is noticing, becoming aware, and then allowing, welcoming it. It's like, it's okay that child came into the room instead of, what are you doing here? I don't want to. Okay. And then letting go is releasing, creating room and space for that energy to flow. And one way to do that is to imagine that you're porous energy, like a sponge or a colander. The idea that we want to open up and bring in something new and cultivate something new, grow something new, because when we let go, there's space. So opening up to the new, the child's mind is a great way to approach that. And you can ask yourself, how can I help myself feel better right now? So just noticing what most calls your attention, what your interior is most drawn to. Letting go of the small stuff is a great practice. My letting go of being annoyed in the bathroom is an example of that. No worries. Even just saying that often trains your brain. Somebody says, I got to change the time. No worries. Okay. Open hand, using embodied action, and you can even do something like pick up a rock and reflect on something you want to let go of, and then say, okay, I'm going to release this and let it go, and drop it as you walk. Cute little comic. Recognizing that some things take time to let go of. We'll return to them for a while before they're fully released. Reaching out for help when emotions are too strong. The writing to release method, which is really great. Shifting from self-blame to self-change. When we make a mistake, the steps: acknowledge, make amends, decide on the course correction, and move forward. Replacing the critical voice, wiring in new ways of supportive self-talk, right, that moves you toward the being you want to be. Examples of self-blame, shifting to self-support for growth and change. Guided meditations that you can listen to regularly that help rewire a self-blaming inner critic voice. These meditations for letting go. And that's it. So thank you so much, everybody. I very much appreciate you being here today. I hope you like the Let Go lecture. And I'm